welcome back to Guided Souls. I am your host, Katie, otherwise known as Guided Soul Katie, and I am so excited to be back here for another episode this week. Happy New Year, happy 2024, bright new beginnings. I so appreciate everyone who has come along this journey with me, and if you're enjoying this podcast and you haven't already, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It means so much to me. But truly, what I'm here to talk about today and what my guest is here to talk about today is human design. And if you don't know anything about human design, don't panic. We will get into it. But it's really something that changed my life earlier this year, changed the way that I approach things, how I am able to manifest things and pivot more quickly because I know how I work and how I'm able to move through the world. And it's one of the topics that I've gotten the most requests to have someone on. So I'm so excited that I actually get to deliver that today. My guest today is Marco. You may know him as Reiki Marco on TikTok or Instagram. And Marco is experienced and trained in Reiki, music, martial arts, human design, and biomechanics. And he's really started focusing and honing in on human design in these past few years. So I really wanted to sit down with him and pick his brain. I feel like he has a way of explaining things that just takes the complicated structure of human design and pares it down into a way that's easier for someone to understand and approach if they've never learned about human design before. So it was such a privilege to have him on. I know you're going to enjoy this episode. And if you want to learn more about Marco, you can find him on TikTok or Instagram at Reiki Marco. You can also visit his website, reikimarco.com. He offers human design reflections, and you can also get your human design chart and download a report from him as well. So I hope you enjoy. Marco, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the pod.
Happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. I am not exaggerating when I say that human design changed my life, and it's such an amazing tool that's definitely gaining momentum. And it's something that a lot of people have been kind of wanting me to talk about on this podcast, but I definitely wanted to bring in someone who's more knowledgeable than me to help me nerd out on it. So thank you for being here. And before we dive in, do you want to just explain a little bit more about who you are and the work that you do?
Sure thing. Yeah. So, well, like you said, my name is Marco. My full name is Marco Muehlbach, and I'm from San Diego. I'm 30 years old. I live on Maui. I have a family. I had a daughter about 13 months ago, and it was the biggest surprise of my life, but it ended up being, the most amazing blessing. I have a wonderful partner, and as I said, we live together here out on Maui. Apart from human design, which has sort of been my recent kind of professional pivot, I'm a reflector within human design, and so I've had a lot of different chapters of my life, which all started with Reiki, which is where the name Reiki Marco comes from. That's the handle that I use everything, or I do everything under, and that was back in 2012. I was in college and was just like, whoa, this is not, I don't think this is going to help me. I don't feel like this is going anywhere. I felt and we talk about homogenization or sameness a lot in human design. And I felt that kind of crushing me and compressing me, turning me into kind of like a cog, in a machine rather than an individual human with a soul and everything. And so I dropped out of college, and my mother took me to a Reiki master. And at the time, I thought it was like psychedelic mushrooms. And I was like, Mom, I already did that in college, and I don't know if that really helped. And she goes, It's not mushrooms. And I said, oh, okay, well, I trust you, Mom. Let's do it. And, the woman at the time who would become my teacher, Marissa, she put her hands on me, and it was like I could breathe for the first time finally. She just held a very gentle space for me. And that allowed me to, it kind of was the first time I was given permission, kind kind of like Harry Potter receiving his letter to Hogwarts, and it wasn't until Hagrid was like, "You're a wizard, Harry," that I was like, "I'm a what?" And so that kind of started my little unconventional journey as an adult. Went on to do Reiki for a lot of really cool people in a lot of really cool places and events, and that led me to working with a group called Sacred Sons, which we do masculine alchemy. And so the grief, the anger, the emotional intelligence, all of this, the brotherhood and the connection, all the stuff that is lacking in society, that seems to be the cause of you know high suicide rates, domestic violence, um, absent fathers, all these plights of the patriarchy, if you will, are really just due to the lack of masculine connection. And so at Sacred Sons, we're stewarding spaces and leadership for men to come together and get that brotherhood and get that medicine so that they can be better men for themselves, for their families, for their kids, for their communities. And it's been beautiful. And up until about 2 years ago, I was traveling around doing events with Sacred Sons, going to festivals, playing music, doing Reiki. And then suddenly I found out I was going to have a baby, like I mentioned. And so I had to completely shift my whole lifestyle in order to accommodate the new life that was coming into my world. And that's where I took what was just kind of like a passion and excitement and kind of like a little guilty pleasure with human design, and I said I'm gonna run with this. This is something that not only am I super interested in and it comes to me naturally, but I also just so happen to have the one of the rarest types as a reflector. So I was like, okay, I think I got the message. I'm gonna put this out there. And I think something that is so important to understand about my own success, or a lot of the reflection that I've done on my own success, has really been the style in which I deliver human design, because it's not something that is meant to replace your old beliefs, or to how you say is better than anything else. And it's also just a mental framework, right? It's just a mental way of understanding energy. And for me, having started with Reiki, over a decade ago, working with energy and healing, and then working with the brothers and, social mechanics and hierarchies and things like that, human design, I was already studying what human design speaks about, which is these subtle energy bodies. And so when I found human design, which was actually kind of around the time when I got into Reiki, I was just at at my friend's little opening of her yoga studio, and someone was like, "Can I read your human design?" And I was like, "Sure." I have no idea what that is. She goes, "Oh my God, you're a reflector." I said, "Oh my God, what does that even mean?" Uh, but I basically, took it with a grain of salt, and again was interested in it, but it really didn't like click for me until I met somebody who was actually living their design. He's a an emotional manifester, or an emotional manifesting generator 1-3. His name's Pasha, and he took me to another level with my movement in terms of showing me biomechanics. And so with the culmination of my baby and learning biomechanics and human design coming online again, I just decided I wanted to share it in a way that was different from some of the stuff that I would see, and in a sense that I'm looking to build um, connections within myself, for my centers, connections with my undefined sacral, connections with my undefined throat, rather than just having all this knowledge floating around in my head. I wanted this to be embodied, and that's something that I put out there, and I give a lot of practices for people to actually come into their bodies, because again, more knowledge and information isn't necessarily going to be the saving grace. And a lot of the times people already know the thing that they actually have to know. They're just unwilling to implement it. And it's by way of, learning more things and getting new certifications that they actually further stifle their own growth. Because again, it's life is actually not as complicated as people want to make it seem. Life is actually very, very simple, and the complexity is built upon that simplicity. But if we come into a resonance and a harmony with the simplicity of life, then all the complexities, they stop being confusing and they start being beautiful. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
I love that. That's so cool. Yeah, you definitely have a unique way of delivering human design concepts, and I think that's potentially one of the barriers and why it's not more widely known is because when you first download or receive your chart, it's like a lot of info
Yeah.
and there's a lot of numbers and shapes and colors and you're just like, what am I looking at?
Right.
And I've known about my human design chart. I actually just discovered it like earlier this year, but I've been studying it and in different ways. But something today was like telling me that I should download your report that you have
Mm.
off of your website because it was going to explain it to me in a different way that hadn't been explained before.
Mhm.
And so I did. And the way that you broke down like the gates and the channels, it's like something clicked in me that had not clicked before. Like I could get the type, I could get the profile, even the centers to a certain extent, but like the gates and the channels, I just could not get there. And the way that it was written in your report just simplified it in a way that was like really beautiful and helped me understand it. So I just want to like validate that the way that you communicate it, both on social media and through like your actual writing and reports, is very unique. And I think can help a lot of people to adopt their human design information in a way that doesn't feel as intimidating and overwhelming.
Oh, well, thank you so much for connecting with it in that way. That was my intention, and there was actually points when I was writing up the reports that I was like, is this enough? Are people going to want more? Like, do they want more text and more words? And for sure, I imagine some people will want more, but and that's why I wrote it the way I wrote it, though, because when I'm learning a new system, I want it in the simplest terms, and I want to go step by step because I personally have kind of had a knack or like a natural talent for doing things. And so, whereas a lot of my classmates would still be struggling with steps 1 and 2, I'd be on to steps, 7, 8, and 9.
Mhm.
And and you see this a lot in children when there's skipping of, like, for instance, crawling or bilateral crawling, which is one hand in front of the other. Like if you have a kid that goes from bilateral crawling straight to walking, and they skip the contralateral crawling, which is the one hand in front of the other. Bilateral crawling, sorry, is this like two hands together. Um, that leads to, or that signals, you know, how you say, developmental issues in that way. And so for me personally, I've had that skill of being able to kind of jump a couple steps ahead, and I've had to kind of like rein myself back so that I'm able to install again those simple foundations, and that actually allow the complexity to scale up quicker later down the road. And so thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. I put a lot of intention into making these. I'm like, because there's people selling reports for like $200 out there, and they're textbooks, they're wordy, and
Right.
I also bought them because I'm like, I want someone to explain this to me, and maybe someone out there can explain it better than the book that I have, which is just the definitive book of human design, which is kind of
Mhm.
like the textbook 101 human design.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was regurgitated, or
Yeah.
like copy pasted, very, very similar. And so I was like, in crafting my reports, that was something that I wanted to, like, okay, if people are going to, buy a report from me, they're going to want my essence in the report, or at
Mhm.
least that's what I
Mhm.
believe, as opposed to just, oh, here's another resource to get human design. It's, here's like Marco's holocron, or here's like Marco's encryption and interpretation of it. And so appreciate that, you saying that so much. That gives me
Yeah.
a nice little warm heart.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for the record, for anyone who's wondering, Marco's reports are $20. So best $20 you can spend today if you're listening to this and you're considering it. For someone who's listening who is like, okay, wait, I have no idea what they are talking about or what human design is, like, can you just give us a brief overview of like what is human design?
Totally. So human design was brought to us by a dude named Ra in, I believe it was 87. And he had this experience where he was effectively like um, invaded by this force from the earth that showed him how to calculate these charts. And that's called the body graph. And the body graph took into account your time of birth and then also 88 days before your birth. This gave us a personality, a conscious self, and then a body or an unconscious self. And then through that, that's what kind of gives us our circuitry, which is where all of the strategies, authorities, and things come from human design. But human design is it's really beautiful. It's based off of light. It's based off of light particles called neutrinos that are basically bombarding the earth, penetrating other planets and moving through us, and they're programming us. And so human design is a way to come into harmony and come into a dance with these neutrinos based off of the circumstances by which we were born. And so, one of the things that I actually recently kind of discovered was that, in human design, we have two pressure centers. We have the head, which is the pressure to think, and we have the root, which is the pressure to do things. It's adrenalized stress. And one thing that I realized about, the head pressure and root pressure is it's gravity and the ability to fight gravity. Every day we stand up, we fight gravity, and we're in this perpetual balance with gravity. Same thing with inhales and exhales, heartbeats, digestion. These are all things that are happening automatically. And when we're able to infuse our intention with those seemingly automatic natural processes, we actually reap more benefits without necessarily having to understand how it works. Like I'm not a scientist. I don't understand how neutrinos work, but I know how to harmonize with them. I know when I'm out of alignment with my own energetic field and aura. And I know that because all I'm doing is just paying more attention than I used to yesterday. And so, again, with human design, we have a mental framework of energy bodies, of circuitry. And you can look at it. One of the best examples that I've ever come up with is thinking about smartphones and how each smartphone has its own operating system, right? And typically it's like you got an Apple smartphone, you're going to have an Apple operating system. Those work the best together. And when you have, like, for instance, an Android running an Apple software, sometimes you run into, little kinks here and there. They can't do the airdrop that the other ones do. And it's really just a matter of syncing the hardware and the software, and each human being has that exact set. You're given hardware, you're given a body, you're given software, you're given a program to run that body on. And if you just experiment with, okay, I'm just going to fully accept this, and I tell people as well, it's like, give yourself an actual chance to see if this system works, right? Give yourself at least 18 months practicing and learning about human design, because the mind works in 18-month cycles in terms of neuroplasticity, letting go of connections, letting go of ideas and ways of doing things, rebuilding them. That process takes 18 months. And usually people are seeing benefits from, again, just understanding their strategy and authority, which I consider the left and right foot of human design. That's where you have to start to stand up in the world. And, again, the gates and the channels and profile, all that stuff is, further up the body. But in terms of strategy and authority, if someone just practiced those two things for 18 months, their life would probably be, a lot of them would do 180, a lot of them would do multiple 180-degree turns, right? But it's just these simple adjustments that over time make a huge difference in whether or not you land where you want to land, or 500 miles to the south of where you want it to land. And again, it's these little micro adjustments, because what I see with human design really is a grounding of astrological principles, because human design is a convergence of astrology, the I Ching, which is a Chinese mystical system for divination, the Kabbalah, and the chakra system. It's a convergence of all these systems, and one of the things that really lit me up about it was specifically that I had been into astrology. I do Reiki, so everyone wants to know your big three. I'm a Pisces, Libra, Virgo, and the what human design did was, I feel like it took all this cosmic soup that is astrology, and it put it in a cup, and the I Ching was that cup, and the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching were that cup. And then in 2017, when they mapped out the human genome and they were looking at the building blocks of our DNA, it synced up perfectly with the hexagrams, 64 little keys in our genetic sequence, 64 hexagrams in the I Ching. And so science is going to, in hopefully sooner, but definitely in the next couple of decades, is going to come to some discoveries, and it's going to start to look at human design less as a, kind of like new age spiritual thing, and more as like an actual science for understanding and even building governments and building businesses based off of it. And it has, I would say, human design itself, the system has some evolutions to go through. However, the fundamentals and the building blocks are already there and already being utilized. So, very exciting
Yeah.
time for human design for sure.
Yeah, I love that. I didn't know about the 18 months thing, so I feel like that's really good for anyone out there to know, cuz I'm one of the ways that human design has changed my life in just a short period of time is, if you had read all of the types to me, I would have told you hands down I'm a manifester. Like that's what I am, totally. I'm not. I'm a manifesting generator. So I was missing the part that, like, oh, I have to respond to cues from the universe. Like, I can try something, but if the universe tells me, no, that is not the way, then, like, I need to pivot. And so I was just like running into brick walls, just being like, I will move this wall. And the
Right.
universe is like, no, you won't. So it was like seriously, just having that one thing has really helped me. And then also discovering my profile, which is a 3-6. So the way that I learn is just experimenting. Like I just have to try something in order to learn from it.
Yep, that's the
um
three.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then with the 6, like the role model part, I'm 29 and a half, and the first, you know 30 years of my life are about experimenting and like learning the lessons before I can move into the second phase. So
Mhm.
my life has pretty much been one big experiment, but yeah, it's just even kind of focusing on those couple of things for the past, I don't know, 7 or so months have made a
Mhm.
really big impact on me. And so if someone is seeing their chart for the first time, where do you recommend they start, and how can they start, living in alignment with their human design?
Right. So, um, great question. So, based off of the circuitry and the connections, right, that are present in the chart, typically you would be given a strategy and authority on my website. And most generators and calculators, they'll tell you your strategy and authority, which again, those are the feet, or that's the foundation of the house. And right, like for instance, for you, you went from the conditioning of a manifester, which is to inform and initiate, to back to yourself, which is waiting to respond. And one
Mhm.
thing I love about this too is everyone has so much resistance towards waiting to respond, right? Everyone like really wants to be a manifester. That's why there's so much conditioning. That's why there's so much burnout, mental illness, gut issues. And it's because people are operating, like the strategy is there to help you take advantage of the natural aura that you're creating, which as a manifesting generator, your aura is enveloping. And the waiting allows you to tune into the things that you're enveloping, the things that are gravitating towards you. You're able to tune in, look at things one at a time, and then listen to your gut response, which one of the practices that I put out there quite a bit because it's very popular, very good for the algorithm and views, but also very good for people to practice, even people that are manifestors, projectors, and reflectors, to practice responding, uh huh, come closer, or uh huh, this is true for me, I don't like that, I don't have energy for that. Even as a non sacral being, it's important that we have a connection to those sounds. Even though it's not necessarily our strategy, it's still important for us to have that connection, I believe. Because it's not like I don't have a gut and, sexual organs. Some people
Yeah.
kind of put it out there like that. Oh, you don't have a gut. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Have you seen my inside? Do I need to show you right now? Anyway, um, so the strategy and authority, right? The strategy helps you take advantage of your aura, and the thing that helps you attune your strategy, however, is the internal authority, right? And that would be either emotional, sacral, splenic, ego, self-projected, mental, or lunar. As a reflector, I have lunar authority, and the inner authority is designed to help create some contrast between us and the external authority, right? This is what external authority is, what mom and dad want us to do, or what our partners want us to do, or what our friends want us to do, or bosses, or society, governments, religion. All of that is external, and it's not that it doesn't matter. What it is that a lot of us are trained to serve the external authority and totally discount our own internal authority. So, for instance, most people have emotional authority. Half of the people in the world have emotional authority. And a lot of these people have been conditioned, right? There have been pressure put on them. Oh, your emotions are too much. You got to figure out this emotional thing. Go to therapy, take drugs. Not right now. This is not a good time for your emotions. I don't have time for this. And they're taught that their emotions are, a problem, or that they're missing out on life because their emotions are in the way. And it's exactly the opposite. It's like your emotions, that actually is your life. And the more that you start to honor your emotions as, again, your own inner authority, for the people with emotional definition, as long as once you start to honor that, then what happens is your external authority starts to shift. The people in your life start to also honor your authority, as opposed to where a lot of people start, which is external authority doesn't give a damn about your internal authority as long as you're able to do the thing that is being asked of you, and you don't complain as much.
Right.
Sometimes the external authority will kick you out as well, which sometimes is a blessing. Sometimes the emotions will guide you away from a situation that you might think is really good for you, but in actuality, it's not harmonizing with the internal emotion. And the best way I can explain this too is like, it's like someone's listening to music and they got a car, they got a speaker and they're listening to music, and then somebody else comes up and they also start playing music, and so
Mm.
now you have two different songs, maybe two different genres, but they're clashing. The difference is coming into a space where music is playing, tuning into the internal authority, realizing, oh, I can play along with this external authority. Do I want to play along with this song? Is my sound appropriate for this? Is there space? Is it being invited? Do I have something
Right.
to respond to? Right. And so these are all questions that the whole wait to respond, wait for an invitation, wait for a lunar cycle. This is, again, we've been programmed the opposite way, and that has kept us in just slightly out of alignment, that we can still exist in the world, but we're living in this like day-to-day struggle, rather than enraptured in this the every single moment and every single breath being beautiful. It's like, well, I'll get there eventually. I'll get there eventually. And
Yeah.
so the waiting thing is really huge. And if anything, it's like the one thing that human design teaches us is patience, even with learning the system, right? Like you asked, what are they going to look at? Again, the first thing I would say, spend the first month really dialing in your strategy and authority. Don't even worry about, centers or any of that stuff. Just really conceptualize and start to practice strategy and authority, right? So if you're a generator or manifesting generator, stop saying yes and no to people. Say uh-huh, uh-uh. Let your body language speak. If you're a projector, stop responding to stuff, right? A lot of the times projectors will respond a lot. They'll be really engaged because their aura naturally it's penetrating. So they want to engage with the other person. However, if they just get a little bit more stoic and understand like, hey, don't give any energy away unless someone recognizes is the value of your energy, again, just even in just a month, people's lives will change. Manifestors and initiation, suddenly things will start happening for the manifestor that actually starts initiating. And the reflector, who's given this absolutely wild strategy. When I heard the strategy of a reflector, wait 28 days before you make a decision, I'm like, how
Yeah.
in the hell is that like practical? How is that supposed to work? And I was already like a pretty patient person. And as I've matured into the implementation of that strategy, naturally I don't wait 28 days to figure out what I'm going to have for dinner, right? But when it comes to who I'm going to work with or where I'm going to live or things like that, what I find is that the strategy actually is like a filter, and it filters out the things that are not for me. The people that don't want to give me 28 days to make a decision, I was never supposed to work with them anyways, right? And a lot of the times too, I will be excited about something at the beginning of a 28-day cycle. Halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, I'll lose steam. I'll realize, oh, actually, that's not necessarily in alignment with me. And so, again, it's a lot of the strategy and authority are just giving people permission to spend a little bit more time considering themselves, and considering that we live in a society where it's like certainty, know who you are, deliver, utility. It's very right. It's very masculine, very utilitarian. Um, it's a 180-degree turn in the opposite direction, and
Right.
so the only way again is to experiment with that. So again, first month or first 28 days, first lunar cycle with human design, strategy, and authority. And then the next month, that's when you start to learn about the centers. So there are 9 centers in human design, right? And they are polarized. They're either going to be connected to another center, which creates definition, and it creates like a relevant movement. So, like my hands are moving forward and backwards, right? According to each other. One's moving forward, one's moving backwards. If I don't have any relevant movement, this is what we would call like an undefined movement of, oh, it's moving in space, but there's nothing to compare it to. There's no energy being transferred anywhere else, and so it's that's what makes it undefined. And the difference, again, going back to music, is like the defined centers are ones that are outputting energy into the world. They're outputting a frequency, right? So solar plexus definition, you're outputting your emotions. Root pressure, you're outputting your stress into the world and your pressure to do things. Now undefined is like a microphone, so it's absorbing and it's sampling. So undefined solar plexus, you're absorbing other people's emotions. Undefined root, you're absorbing other people's root pressures. And this is really important to note because, again, it's not that you don't have your own emotions or you don't have your own root pressure. It's just yours is typically on the back burner because
Mm.
whoever you're around, theirs is usually going to be on the front, right?
Right.
And so one of the concepts within human design that we explore is signature contrasted with not self. So the signature is like the essence of who you are. You're using your strategy, you're using your authority in every moment. For generators, it's satisfaction. For projectors, it's success. For manifestors, it's the peace. For reflectors, it's surprise. Now, when we're not doing that, it's because we're not following our strategy, we're not following our authority, or it's because one of our undefined centers is attempting to define itself using a sample that it picked up rather than remaining as it is, beautiful and undefined. Right? These undefined centers, these microphones that are empathic and picking stuff up from the world, they're either going to be playgrounds or prison cells, right? Depending on if we let them be and let energy move through them like a river, or if we dam the river up and we try and define it, because again, that's what the external authority is constantly asking us to do. And so with that being said, when we have, like, for instance, the undefined root, when we have the undefined root subservient to somebody else's root pressure, maybe you're working at the pace of your boss or you're working at the pace of your partner, what happens is the not self can emerge through there too. And it emerges through specific kind of channels. For instance, if you have the undefined root, and you are rushing through things just to get the pressure off of your back, that for a generator leads to frustration.
Mhm.
For the projector leads to bitterness. For the manifester leads to anger. For the reflector leads to disappointment. And again, it's guiding us back. It's like the thermometer in our houses. Like, is it snowing out where were you at, by the way?
No.
It looks like super snowy. But anyway,
I think it's just the sky.
It's just so bad. The, but the so for instance, if it's cold, right, and you turn the thermometer on, you give the heater a job. Keep the temperature at this level, right? Let's say you walk outside and you leave the door open. Now there's cold air coming in. There's a new stimulus coming in, and the temperature is going, whoa, 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 we need to turn the heater on way higher. The heater starts working harder, right? But if you were to have closed the door, that leak wouldn't have got in, and the heater, you wouldn't have had to expend that much energy. And so the not self themes of disappointment, bitterness, frustration, and anger are just like that thermometer saying, hey, there's something going on, and it's just like pain as well in the body. Something's going on. You need to put some attention on this thing, otherwise you're going to be expending a lot more energy than you normally would, or sometimes even more energy than you actually have. And that's where people experience like burnout, overwhelm, all these kinds of things. And so the second step is to really understand, what are your defined centers, what are your undefined centers, and specifically what not self themes are hiding in your undefined centers. One of the big ones is for people with the undefined heart or the undefined ego. These are people who, they don't necessarily have the will to prove themselves, and so when they end up engaging in things to prove themselves, that then create summons their not self theme, saying, hey, why are you trying to prove yourself in this situation? That's not even going to tell you who you are or give you any more sense of worth. It's just going to suck up your energy, right? Same thing with the G center. People without the with the undefined G center who are looking for love and direction in the world. Oh, I'm going to do this career because that'll make me a lot of money, or oh, I'm going to be an influencer, or this person. I'm going to take on this identity because it's going to give me some kind of direction. You're not really here to have a fixed direction, right? You're here to experiment, and you're here to allow that flow and look to your definition, look to your defined centers to figure out who you are. Because these undefined centers, these are opportunities again to experience the world through the eyes of a child without knowing the names of everything, just being able to actually experience the thing rather than, oh, I know what that's called, and it does this and it does that. It's like, what a mystery, what a beautiful mystery. And it's again this state of reverence that I think religion is losing its grip on, which is another thing I think is important to talk about, is like where we're at right now in the global cycle of human design. 2027 is an important date because we're leaving the age of planning and the age of infrastructure and big business and big governments behind, and we're stepping into this more individualized, how you say, tribal way of living. That there's a reason why the government, it looks like it's falling apart, because it is. The infrastructure of all of it is falling apart, and it's going to come down to individuals and our actual immediate connections in our local tribes, that is going to determine who actually gets to move forward in life, because we can't take the infrastructure with us, right? Even in some ways, human design is going to become obsolete because, again, mental construct, infrastructure. The whole point of it now is that we are in that transition period, and so part of my mission is to like wake as many people up as we can. And what that wasn't always my mission. Before, I was like, oh, don't wake people up, like they'll wake up when they're ready. And now I'm like, yo, actually, we gotta kind of hurry up. The beauty about it, though, again, like I said, it's simple. Spend the first 2 months with your strategy and authority. The next month learning about your centers, and then the month after that, then that's when you start to explore your gates and your channels. Which, as you said, my reports, I just lay it all out.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. I love that so much. And when I saw that my not self theme was frustration, like I just connected to that on such a deep level. I was like, that is so real. So
Right.
even like in the past couple of days, I have felt myself getting frustrated with certain aspects of my life. And I even recognize like, oh, something is off. I need to like pivot in some way or look at something in order to kind of switch to that mode of satisfaction. What
Mm-hmm.
is there like a specific place in your chart that you should look if you're feeling you're not self, or is it just like you got to look through all the pieces and see if there's a spot where you're not in alignment with it.
Yeah. So what typically happens is the not self emerges um, when the being is basically not trusting that what they've got is what they're supposed to have.
Hmm.
Right. So, for instance, again, somebody with we can use a different example. Somebody with an undefined ajna. The ajna is the awareness center. It's a the ability to conceptualize a solid reality. So it's effectively it's certainty, right? And somebody with an undefined ajna is not here to operate off of certainty. I'm not here to convince you that I'm certain of anything. You either trust me and see me and appreciate me, or you don't, right? And so if I have an undefined ajna and I'm constantly trying to convince people I'm certain, right, that would be the place to look. Because and it happens with gates as well, right? We have some gates that are called hanging gates, um, or dormant gates as well. So hanging gates, in terms of terminology and technicalities, hanging gates are indefined centers that are not connected to another to the channel, right? And then a dormant gate would be a gate in an undefined center that is not connected to a channel, right? And so, for instance, you have something like the 43 in the ajna that's reaching down without the 23. A lot of those weird ideas that you have about yourself, or realizations that you have about yourself, even if someone asks you, it might be challenging for you to put it into words,
Hmm.
right? And so then you might say, oh man, I understand it, but I can't speak it. I can't like manifest it. There's something wrong with me. Frustration, right? Whereas you could say, looking at your chart, you might say, oh, I have the hanging 43. So even if someone asks me, I may not be able to put it into words. There's nothing wrong with me. There's no need to be frustrated about it. And also understand, like, the conditioning of again, society is going to put pressure on that. It's going to put pressure on be everything for everyone, right? You're supposed to be whole, and if you're not, then you're worthless, right? All or nothing. And no one is built like that. No one comes into this life with every channel active, right? And yet we are judging ourselves based off of what we can't do, and we never actually get to experience what we're capable of. And so the place to look for the not self, or why I'm in the not self, is to look at the undefined centers and look at the other end of the hanging gates, because there's a beautiful opportunity for, again, those gaps in our chart, quote unquote gaps, to be playgrounds, in the sense that, like, for instance, if you and me are connecting, I have the 43, you have the 23. The 23 would be the splitting apart in the throat that allows for the insights of the 43 to come through. Well, then there might be a beautiful opportunity where I feel like, wow, I've never been able to conceptualize these ideas before, and now with you I feel like it just clicks. And for you, you might have this dawning of like, wow, I'm having so many insights about myself that normally I wouldn't be having. And it's because of this electromagnetic connection, which, again, everyone loves that, because that's where you actually look for compatibility and romance and chemistry and things like that. But again, the kicker of it is, it's like the insights that I'm sharing with you may not necessarily be for you. Same as the things that you are verbalizing for me may not always be relevant for me. So it's not like once you find somebody that bridges your gaps, like, oh, they're going to have all the answers for you. It's just going to give you a taste of what it would feel like to access that channel. And then when you're apart, you're apart. Your auras are out of sync. Bluetooth is out of range. The music starts to get choppy, and eventually there's no more music, right? And so we're really working with, and the human design and the body graph really shows us, again, what is always going to be there. I will never not have the circuitry that I have, same as you, right? You will never not have the defined sacral and, some of your other defined centers. And so that is the place where, human design really tells us to that's where you build your castle. You don't build it on transit hookups and, relationship composites and pentas, which is analysis of 3 to 5 people. You don't build it on that. You build it on your own body graph. Because when you do that, then it's like you can invite people over to your house and you can send them away, rather than building a communal house where everyone lives together and you hope that everyone gets along and you have to figure out governance. And again, all that can happen. But the best way to do it is to really know what you can bring to the table, and also what you're not supposed to bring to the table, right?
Right.
Another interesting place to look in terms of not self is it with your parents' charts, or whoever raised you. Because for instance, if I have an undefined heart but my dad has a defined heart, well, then that makes sense why I'm trying to prove myself so often, because my dad is built to prove himself. He's built to, work until the sun goes down and then work even more. Whereas I'm getting tired, right? I want to go lay down, but I'm pushing through because my dad is telling me, and he's the external authority as a child. So a lot of the formative years, especially 1 through 7, obviously, but in the transitory years of 7 to 14, and especially 14 to 28, because that's where we start to get some separation from our parents. But a lot of the times we end up attracting people who are very similar or completely polar opposites, which both of those serve to bolster the conditioning, and again, a lot of the time drive us deeper into some of the delusions and the illusions that we have around who I should be, versus considering like what actually am I. And also too, not taking human design too literally, and again, experimenting with it, rather than just like, all right, cool, I'm now this. It's like, well, you were something else before, and we don't just throw that away. We work to unearth it, because the reality is that, again, you're never not who you are. So it's not about, integrating these new pieces into yourself. It's actually about dissolving the layers that are not you, so that you can reveal your uniqueness.
When you boil it down, it's kind of like a beautiful journey to self-love and acceptance. It's like
Yeah.
just accepting exactly who you are, the gifts that you
Mhm.
have, and not ever trying to force or make yourself do things that you just aren't meant to do. So
Mhm.
yeah, I love that perspective. And do you have to know someone's like date or their time of birth in order to like look up their human design chart?
Yes, it
Okay.
can, and it can change. So here's the T on that one. So within a 24-hour window, there can be all four types present on that
Okay.
day, being born on that day. Now, their gates and channels will not change that much. But for instance, somebody that would be a reflector, um, if they were born 2 hours earlier, but they were born 2 hours later and now they're a generator, it's likely because of
Hmm.
one gate that got hooked up, and now the G and the sacral are defined, right? And so, one thing that you can do though, because it's not always that case, it's not always that there's going to be so much variance within a 24-hour time period. So, what you can do is you can just put in a date, like if they know their birthday, start it at, 12:01 a.m. and then do 6 a.m. and then do 12 p.m. and then do 6 p.m. Have a couple different times that you use, and just track and see if any of the gate changes have made a big difference. So like you can get a general idea of who somebody is with just their birthday, but to really get down to the accuracy, or using human design to its fullest potential, you do need the actual birth time, which there are people who do muscle testing and various different methods of actually discovering birth times, which I don't necessarily have any good resources for that, but it is out there for people that were like, oh, my mom doesn't remember, or something like that. There are places you can go to kind of like reverse engineer the birth time. And even if you can't, again, at least the way that I teach it in terms of experimenting, it'll be clear which strategy works best for you, you
Right.
know and that's something that people ought to, I think, as an experiment. And I've done this before. As an experiment, I've used my sacral responses as my strategy for 28 days at a time. I've used initiating as a strategy for 28 days at a time. And I can tell you with confidence as a reflector, I like my strategy. It works. It does work better for me.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, not that I'm trying to psychoanalyze everyone in my life, but sometimes,
But
you're like a little bit of insight might,
yeah,
help us.
well, and if you have the right intentions too, right? Because there's some people that it's like, for instance, they would do that as a means of giving themselves the knowledge and the understanding with how to manipulate myself so that I'm more valuable to this person. A lot of
Right,
people
right.
unconsciously are doing that and they won't admit
Yeah.
it, but that's what they're doing. And if anyone is thinking, oh, I would never do that, I want to invite you, like, really spend some time with it, because there's another way to psychoanalyze someone or get information, get the dirt on somebody, and with a different style of intention, rather than manipulating yourself to be more attractive to this person, just like giving that person grace,
Mm.
seeing where they might be struggling against themselves, and giving them a word of encouragement, like, hey, you don't always have to know the answers. Well, you don't have anything to prove to me, you
Yeah.
know it's okay that you don't know when enough is enough. It's okay that you're avoiding conflict. It's okay that you're rushing through things. You're learning, right? So to give someone grace, as opposed to, again, what I said prior, um, you know, same thing, just different intentions.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, all about giving grace here. Love
Yeah, yeah.
that. What would you say is the most underrated part of the chart, or that like kind of gets overlooked by maybe other reports, or people who talk about human design?
That's a great question. I've not thought about that one. Okay. This is great. Thank you for asking this question. Um, the most underrated part about this is that, like, it's our body. People talk
Mm.
about, again, human design as, like, in terms of strategies and authorities, as like etheric pieces and energetic pieces, but this really does come down to physiology, right? It does come down to biology, and Richard Rudd did a lot of really beautiful work in terms of relating it to specific acids and specific you know combinations. Again, I'm not a scientist, but specific stuff for our physiology. And I believe that I'm here actually to take it a step further in terms of creating actual exercises and movements that correlate to the human design body graph and what circuitry you have. So, for instance, I could look at someone's circuitry and I can say, oh, yeah, 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 you definitely need to be doing these like unilateral lunge squats and working more on your rotational line. Right. And I would look at them physically move and I'd be able to see. And this is something that, in a way is very experimental for myself as well, in that, again, nobody has done it. But when Ra talks about the body graph, he talks about this like this hardwiring, right? That's ingrained in us, just like our skeletons are ingrained with us. And something that I picked up about, I would say, like 3 years ago from one of my buddies, Pasha. He taught me biomechanics, which is basically bio's life, mechanics is how something works. And so we're looking at how life works, specifically how the body works in relationship to gravity, right? And looking at the best walkers, runners, and throwers on the planet, they all have the same mechanics. They all move their arms first, and then their chest moves, and then they take their step, right? Versus tweakers, where one arm's going fast, one arm's going slow, one foot's doing a dance, and the other's like dragging behind them, right? Everything is like out of sync. In biomechanics, or in walking, running, and throwing, there's a walking song that we have to learn. And so, but because we all have generally the same skeletons and the same ratios of our bones and whatnot, that's the same for us. But when it comes to these subtle energies of that human design reveals to us, again, there are some energies are more defined than others. And so the opportunity to work on the parts of your chart that are defined through specific exercises in the physical body, and work on things that are undefined in your chart, undefined gates, undefined centers, through physical exercises in your body, that this is something that I think is going to be huge once I eventually figure out how to, universalize it. Right, I'm a 3-5, so my way is. similar to yours. Like I gotta just fail faster, make a bunch of mistakes, and then unconsciously it's all being universalized. So trusting that universalization for me has of course been a journey, uh, and I would say that would be the thing that is the most underrated, is that again, people want to learn so much stuff about human design, and they think that by learning more they're going to become a better version of themselves. But it's really like you actually have to practice more, right? If you have emotional authority, what you got to practice is stepping away from your commitments so that you can be more devoted to your emotions than the people in your life, really. And not
Mhm.
and not to say that those people don't matter, but they may not even know the real you. So why do you put so much energy into, why are those relationships so important to you, more important than your relationship with your emotions, right? If you're a sacral being and you respond to people with words, yes, I think I can do that. Yeah, I don't know if I really want to go do that, right? Rather than or that's the practice, right? Projectors, you gotta, whatever it is that you really think is valuable, shut everyone out. Like, be a hermit and just do the thing that you think is valuable until people will start coming and looking for you,
Yeah.
right? And so it's really about, again, this term of embodiment over enlightenment and transcendence, which
Yeah.
seems to be a lot of the new age rhetoric and new age, even coaches and gurus. It's more
Mhm.
traps of the same kind of like capitalistic consuming, preying on people who want to prove themselves, or people who want to avoid conflict, or people who want to convince the world that they're certain, or people that want to solve everyone's problems, right? And it's the nature of our capitalistic world. But again, just like before, it's like there's the opportunity to manipulate, right, for the sake of my own personal gain. And then there's the ability to attune, still manipulate, but attune to like what's actually going to be best for you. Take myself out of the equation. And that's easier, I would say, for a reflector than others sometimes. Um, and manipulate in the same way that, a sculptor manipulates clay, right? Because
Mhm.
manipulation is often seen as, or perceived as, something that's bad, but it's an act. Same as grief. A lot of people's like, oh, you're grieving, that's bad, you must not want to grieve. No, I want to grieve,
Yeah.
right? I want to move this energy, emotions. Oh, that's bad, it must suck to have so much emotions. No, this is so much fuel. Once I have this stuff refined, or I've been refining it, and look at what I'm creating. And so again, it's a letting go of good or bad, and starting to see the world kind of the way like the native people would see it, or the indigenous people would see it, which is like there's possibilities and consequences,
Yeah.
right? And even in human design, we have something called exaltation and detriment, right? So, for instance, my moon is in 48.5 in detriment. And so I could view this as like, oh, so that means that, my lunar forces are always going to be in like a negative light. Not, no, not necessarily. It's a this or a that kind of thing. It may be perceived by the external authority as negative, but it's actually helping me connect to myself more, in which case
Right.
that's positive, right? Maybe possibilities and consequences, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that word embodiment, and I feel like that's something that um I've definitely been getting kind of like as a channel recently to do more of, and I'm so excited to see more of your kind of body movement stuff as that grows.
Oh
And
yeah.
I also saw on your website that you do human design reflections.
Right.
What is that?
So it's a combination, and this is, I was, when I first started doing it, I was calling them readings, and because I'm not an analyst, I wasn't trained by the International Human Design School. I'm self-taught, and pretty much everything I'm self-taught, or taught by a teacher that doesn't really give a damn about certifications, like my buddy Pasha. And and so, when I was thinking about what I do when I connect with someone, and as a reflector, what I'm here to do for the world is I give them reflections, and I help them come to terms with where they're at, because I believe that most people know where they want to go, but they won't ever get there because they will not take accountability of where they're at. They have blind spots, right? Like you can't, the reason you can see yourself is because you have a camera. And same for me. Unless we have a reflection, it can be very hard to know if there's something on my face. Right. And so the
Yeah.
ability to look at yourself and get a clear image of, oh, okay. And a lot of my sessions I find are, we spend half the time talking about human design and the other half talking about personal stuff,
Hmm.
personal things that are, the person is there, the client is having revelations like, oh my God, this is why I do that. And it like, I use human design as like kind of like little openings to then start to allow the person to open up and share things that they've never shared before, have thoughts that they've never had thoughts before. But I would say the one of the main things that the reflection offers is it's like a trajectory, right? And one of the things that I feel like I'm beautiful at doing is being able to take, an entire life, because a lot of people that come are, in their third, between like 30 and 50 years old. I've had a couple who are like 19, 17
Hmm.
years old, which has been awesome. But a lot of people have already had a lot of experience. And so one of the phrases that comes up a lot is, man, I wish I had this when I was younger. And the thing I always say is, you would have ignored it when you were younger.
Hmm.
You wouldn't have known what to do with it. The only time for you to really use this information is right now, right?
Yeah.
Because that kind of talk is, again, it's disconnected from where you're at. Again, it's continuing to look at, oh, my life would be better if this happened back then, and then that wouldn't have happened, rather than, oh my God, look what I have now.
Yeah.
So in a way, I hold a standard of like, look, we're going to take all the beliefs you have about yourself. This is the truth. And we're going to bang it against the truth, and we're going to see what's true. And I teach people how to do that, how to bang things against the truth. Because, and you hear this a lot as well, is, oh, I'm speaking my truth, or I'm just
Hmm.
living out my truth. It's like, dude, your truth doesn't exist. That's called your opinion, right? The truth is that, the sun rises and the sun sets, and that life grows where there's water, and where there's not water, life has a harder time, right? There's truths about this. You're either living in integrity and living in alignment, or you're living in integrity slightly out of alignment, or you have no integrity at all and you're super out of alignment, right?
Hmm.
Luckily enough, probably about 9 out of 10 of the sessions, people they're super in integrity and just a little bit out of alignment.
Yeah.
So I just gotta, hey, this is the thing. I noticed I asked you a question and you went and explained it. You could have just said, uh huh. You see what happened? You see that? Yeah, okay. Remember that the next time you start going off explaining something, when I just need to know, do you have energy for this or do you not have energy for this? Um,
Right.
as one of the most common things that actually happens when I'm with generators, and I'm like, "Do you drink tea?" And they're like, yeah, I used to drink tea, but I got back on coffee, which I know is not good." And I was like, "Okay, I'm going to ask you again, sacral sounds only. Do you drink tea?" And they're like, "Uh huh." "Do you know of a good tea shop around?" "Uh huh." "Can you commit to going there once a week?" "Uh huh." I'm like, "You see how much work we just got done
Yeah.
with that? Could have been like 10 minutes of talking." But yeah, so that's in terms of a reflection, because I'm bringing into the reflection not only my knowledge with human design, but also my experience with Reiki, my experience with brotherhood, my experience as a musician, a martial artist, and a biomechanics specialist as well. And it's something that, again, similar to my reports, I'm like, if people are coming to me, it's because they want to work with me. It's not that they want to know their human design better. That's part of the allure, but ultimately it's so much more than human design. And it's and
Yeah.
because human design is so much more than just human design as well, right? There's a life to be lived. There's an experiment to be had. And I know people who are very pigeonholed in the human design narrative, and it's all, oh well, this because of that, and this and that and that, and if they just did this and that, and it's like, you're just like, you've turned life into this like very sterile, like what the West does best is you've sterilized life, um,
Yeah.
so that it makes sense to your brain, rather than dropping into your body the embodiment and being able to live through that, not needing to change the world, and
Yeah.
actually being able to appreciate it maybe for the first time in their lives.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. That's amazing. I love that idea of a reflection, and it makes sense because you are a reflector.
Uh, yeah, and that's funny too because according to textbook human design, our auras are not intermingling because you are where you are and I'm far away, and there's a computer here. However,
Mhm.
in my experience, I think that these auras that we have are finding ways to communicate with each other,
Yeah.
right? And even though it's not your real voice, I'm hearing your voice through my speakers, you're hearing my voice through your headphones. There is still while it is a diminished essence, there is still an essence that is able to come through. And like, you look at it in social media, that perception of someone is different than if you're texting them, which is different than if you're talking to them, which is different than video, which is different than physically being with them, right? And so there's these layers of essence or emanation that are able to come through, and that's another reason why I put reflections up there, because when I'm with somebody, I'm physically I'm reflecting them, and I
Yeah.
tell them right out the gates too. I'm just like, if I've never met them before, usually things will come up and they'll be like, man, I don't know what it is about you, I just love you so much. And I'm like, I'll have you know, you may not know much about human design, but the things that you love about me are probably just the things you love about yourself, but maybe you're a little bit too shy to bring them online. So let's
Yeah.
dance around. Let's play a little bit. Let's bring that online. Or the things you don't like about me. This one's usually lands a little bit harder. Are just things that you don't want to accept that you do the same thing, my friend. Or
Right.
you don't want to accept that you could do that, but you won't do that because of X, Y, and Z, right? So
Yeah.
it's been a beautiful journey, and especially too as a reflector, people ask me a lot like, how do you make so much content as a reflector? And I'm like, well, to be totally honest, I don't really have a brand image. I don't necessarily have a strategy. I just know that there are people out here who deserve to hear this message, and that if I just let go of all the things I'm supposed to do and I just let myself third line it and make some mistakes, I typically say some pretty brilliant stuff, and
Yeah.
other people will agree, other people disagree, and that's okay too, right? Because the perplexed are the perplexed, and the confused are the confused. And if they want to ask questions and be open, cool. If they want to throw daggers, that's fine. I've trained a lot to be able to dodge daggers and catch them and throw them back. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
capable in that sense.
Oh, I love that so much. Well, I have a few like last little questions for you, but is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to make sure we talked about today?
Um, No, I think you asked some great questions. I really appreciate that, and I
Well,
and I feel like, again, third lining it. If it's what has been said has been said, I have spoken.
amazing. Yes, I love it. Okay. Well, first question, if you could tell yourself, your younger self, one thing, what would it be?
Mm, don't worry about being perfect.
Hmm.
Kind of it.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah. Don't worry about
I
being
love
perfect.
it. What is one thing that you've done recently that you are grateful to yourself for?
Ooh, this is a deep one actually because it's very clear. So I've been doing these Sacred Sons events for since like 2018, so it's been a while, and a big part of why men come to these events is to process big emotions, right? Loss of a loved one, separation, all kinds of big energies as you can imagine. You can fill in the blanks, and part of what allows this to happen is having somebody who's able to attune to a man and able to sort of guide them deeper into those expressions, so that they're not just out here telling a story, that they're actually able to feel what's going on. And for a lot, many of those years, I took it upon myself to be that man or to be one of the men doing that. And this last, we just had we call it Maui Mana. And we invite men from across the world. We have some dudes from Norway, and then the rest of the United States. But we invite men to come be with us in our brotherhood that like we all hang out and sweat together and train together, and we invite men to be in that container with us. And normally, like I said, I'm one of the men that's stepping in with the other men and processing, helping them process, guiding them. And I got this hit at the very beginning of our event. You remember when you just used to like play music and teach movement and dance with dudes, and you weren't that guy? Like, do you have an attachment to being that guy? And I'm like, well, if I don't do that, then, you know, do I even deserve to get paid for this event? And like, will the bros think that I'm like pulling my weight because there's like a lot more guys than usual? And but the hit just kept coming. Like, no, 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 you're good. Like, they got it. You're good. Listen to yourself. And so I had a conversation with them, and I told them, hey, I don't want to do any processing this time around. And they're like, really? And I was like, yeah. Is that okay? And they're like, yeah, that's cool. Thanks for letting us know. And so again, it was this big thing in my head, right?
Yeah.
Because I sat with it for a couple hours, and I was like, do I tell him? Do I not tell him? I told him, and it was like, yeah, cool, great. And in doing that, and one thing that's important about the nature of a reflector as well, right, is they could kind of do everything, right? And I
Mhm.
see a lot of reflectors with that ability of like, oh yeah, I can jump in here, I can jump in there, I can jump. They're very versatile beings
Yeah.
because of how much openness they have in their chart. Doesn't necessarily mean they're supposed to do that though.
Mhm.
And in a lot of ways, for me to step out of that, I was able to have a much more lucid eye, detached eye, and able to guide things overall and participate in ways that really elevated the event in everyone's opinion, in my own, a lot more. So actually stepping out of the typical leadership role, I was actually able to lead in a way that was more authentic and more rejuvenating and exciting for me. And so yeah, I'm super proud of that. Also,
So
just being a
cool.
dad, like coming home and being so excited to just like play with my daughter and
Yeah.
love up on my partner. That also, I was really proud of myself for that as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
What is something that you think you're being a little too hard on yourself for, where you want to give yourself some more grace?
Ooh, this whole like mutation of human design and bringing, because I'm like, is it a course, is it a 100-day challenge, is it this, is it that? And I've got some things on the pot, but the for me the reality and the grace comes in. I wake up at like 5 in the morning and I meditate, and I do this thing called RPM, which is rise piss meditate, which I highly recommend everyone does, even if you only meditate for like, I usually only meditate for like 5 minutes. um, but it's just such a great way to start the day. And I've been doing that for like probably, I learned Reiki in 2012. So I've been doing it since 2012, RPM every day. Um, but going to the gym afterwards and doing my biomechanics and stuff, and just like allowing that to be the fertile soil from which this system, I don't even know what it is, school, whatever it is that is emerging in the fusion between biomechanics and human design. um, I want to give myself more grace there, and also letting go of the idea that like someone could steal it from me
Mm-hmm.
or steal
Mm-hmm.
the idea. Oh, so I want to do it because someone else might get to it first. It's like, well, they may already have it. It doesn't matter. It's not going to devalue what I have to offer. So just and in really the grace for me is like allowing myself to enjoy the fumbling around and, oh, that doesn't work, because that's usually where I will like end up making my bangers. And it's the same thing with music, where it's like I'll be like, oh, I don't like this song, but I'll try and make it better. And there's days when I'm just like, I don't like this song, okay, I'm gonna go to the next one, and I'll go like 30 songs deep in one night. And then
Yeah.
on the 30th song I hit something and I'm like, there's the magic. Rather than trying to make the first one the thing, I just let myself fail. And actually that brings up something I want to share too around, everyone is like, trying to create their perfect per situation or etc, perfect person, perfect relationship. And it reminded me of this personal development seminar I went to, where it was about recruiting and sales and stuff. But it's super relevant for this point. And he asked for two volunteers to come up, and he gave one of the volunteers a pen and a piece of paper, he says, I want you to draw the ace of spades. Okay, you're going to physically draw the card, the ace of spades, on this piece of paper. And to the other volunteer, he gave a deck of cards, and he goes, I want you to find the ace of spades, and we'll see who can do it faster. And he started the timer, and 4 seconds go by, and the guy with the deck of cards just ran through them and found the ace and was like, there it is. Meanwhile, the other guy barely had finished the outline of the card. And so, for me, especially as a third line, what it means is that, if I'm able to fail faster, I'm actually getting closer and closer to my success rather than trying to orchestrate my own success or
Mhm.
orchestrate your satisfaction. If you just trust that process, and again, particularly for the threes and the sixes, that is going to be the thing that actually gets us closer to the goal, and actually also engages us more in the process of it, because it's the fear of failure that oftentimes cause people to go to the graves with music inside them and their books and their businesses and their relationships. It's the fear of failure
Yeah.
that really, it's what makes the graveyard the richest place in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's so deep and so real. As a fellow three, I feel that so deeply.
Yeah.
And then last question, if you could offer one piece of advice or words of encouragement for someone who's just starting out on their spiritual journey, what would it be?
Mm. I would say, really, if you're starting this journey, you have to learn how to trust the process.
Hmm.
There's going to be uncomfortable times. There's going to be times when you're all alone. There's going to be times when you want to give up. And it's important to simply trust the process.
Yeah.
Like, in the spiritual journey, there's so many ups, there's so many downs. And in this, also, I want to say is like, don't ever respect anyone more than you respect yourself.
Hmm.
Don't give somebody more control over your life than the amount of control that you're willing to command in your own life. And in this way, it's like, wherever you're at is wherever you're at, right? The better, the more clearly you can see where you're at, the more accurately you'll be able to take steps in the direction that you want to go.
Yeah.
Also, I would say, start really simple. Like, the reason why the RPM things, I've been able to do that for, how many years is it now? 11 years.
11. Yeah.
It's because if I miss the RPM in the morning, it takes 5 minutes to do. I just have to go
Hmm.
pee and meditate.
Hmm.
It's so simple. And again, a lot of the fear of failure preventing starting is because, your version of success is so massive. Oh,
Hmm.
do yoga for an hour a day. How about start with 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Do yoga for 5 minutes every day, meditate for 5 minutes, train biomechanics for 5 minutes every day, as opposed to setting this big goal for yourself, maybe hitting it for the first couple days, but then failing and then being like, oh, spending a week or two, or maybe even never picking that commitment up again. But the commitments should be small and they should be measurable, right?
Yeah.
Again, 5 minutes of training, 10 minutes of meditation, and just build up from there, right? It's like, however you rise is how you're going to fall. So
Hmm.
don't look for that meteoric viral quantum leap. Look for the steady rhythm that will take you hundreds and hundreds of miles with no interruptions, nice and smooth, nice and intentional. You also get to enjoy the view while it's better.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that. That is so beautiful. Marco, thank you so much for being here with me, sharing all of your wisdom. I am ready to go dive into my chart again and look at everything again. And I just can't thank you enough for sharing this space with me today.
Katie, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed this. I feel like you really helped alchemize a lot of my ideas that I'm not necessarily able to share in my videos when I'm making my content and things like that. And so I really appreciate you and your energy. And I'm looking forward to continuing to follow you and all the amazing work that you're doing.
Yes, absolutely. Right back at you. That wraps things up for this episode of Guided Souls. Thank you so much for being here with me today. If you're enjoying this podcast and you haven't already, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. And if you would like to send in an email to be read anonymously on the podcast, you can email guidedsoulllc@gmail.com. I have a couple of topics coming up for guests. One is someone who's a manifesting coach, and then I have another individual who's going to talk to us about being an entrepreneur within the spiritual world. So if you have specific questions for either of those topics or any topic, go ahead and send those to guidedsoulllc@gmail.com. I appreciate all of you so, so much. And as always, keep going. You are doing amazing, and I love you.